Caddis Maximus here again. I wanted to do another review of extensions, just focusing on these Harbor Freight Professional. Actually, not all of these are the Professional label impact extensions. Most of these are wobbles. I have a few of the straight ones. The only thing I don't have here that they do sell, I believe, is the half-inch drive, just regular half-inch drive impact straight extensions. Although I have the half-inch drive reducer extensions, and those are kind of neat. One other thing I wanted to mention is I've had not as good of luck with the wobble extensions or the chrome molybdenum extensions from Harbor Freight as compared to just the straight 3/8 ones, which are chrome vanadium. The other weird thing is I bought these a while ago and I haven't checked to see, but when you buy the 3/8 ones, they say PF on them. They don't say Harbor Freight or Pittsburgh or anything, and I thought that was a little bit strange. The rest of these, like the new ones, say Pittsburgh Pro chrome or chrome molybdenum, and then if you ever see on the shelf that they're the old ones, is because the old ones had laser engraving on them and they didn't have any stamping. Also, as far as I know, these are all 3-piece sets except for the 3/8 inch drive impact extension which was 4 pieces, and the locking half-inch drive extension, that appears to be the only one Harbor Freight sells. A couple things to mention about the newer and the older versions. Let's take a look and we'll compare against the Mastercraft. The first thing about the all the Harbor Freight wobble extensions is they're a little bit more simply made. They really just have 2 flats to make the trapezoid for the wobble, and a little bit nicer extension like on this Mastercraft. You'll see they'll actually machine it so it's a nice arc, and those do tend to work a little bit more smoothly. So I'll mention that as the anvils are a little more cheaply made. The second property is on the old ones with the laser etching, they had a shelf so the socket could lock on straight. They stopped doing that and went with the second generation, and they don't have that ability. You don't have the choice between getting both of these. They just got rid of these probably because of complaints, and just replaced them with these. And I actually like having both styles. The standard wobble extension, and we'll show wobble extensions just allow you to get a slight 5-degree bend. They're a little bit chunky because you're using a square to try to drive as a universal joint, but they can allow you to get into some much tighter spaces, and they can be quite handy. They are a lot weaker because they have this area that's turned down significantly smaller than the drive. So they always, if they break, they always break there. And it seems on the chrome molybdenum Harbor Freight ones, I've not had as good of luck because I've broken quite a few of them with surprisingly low amounts of force. And I've replaced them, and the replacements seem to hold up better, so it may be like a heat treatment issue, but I know that the quality of the steel isn't exactly the same as a Proto or a Snap-on or something like that. And it seems in a tool like this, where you have a lot of force concentrated, the quality of the steel and the heat treatment makes a big difference. And when people talk about chrome molybdenum steel, it isn't just chrome molybdenum steel. I mean, there's obviously iron and carbon, this very specific grade of chrome molybdenum, and their heat treatment is really what makes the difference between a cheaper and a more expensive tool. There's probably a few dozen grades of chrome molybdenum steel, and I did want to point that out. Now, when we talk about the older version, which had the shelf, I liked about those was that it was a standard wobble extension. And then if you wanted to, you could push it in and the socket would get stuck, would go around that little undercut area, and it would hold the socket straight so it would become a normal extension. And admittedly, a couple of the ones that I've broken were because of using them in exactly this fashion, where you use a little bit of wobble to get the socket on, and then you can go straight to actually break it. Another time is if you pry on it, it can tend to want to break the anvil off. I will say that the newer ones are more modern than what were the chrome vanadium ones. They have a thicker buckle because you do need more material when you have chrome vanadium, and they have the proper cutout and through hole on both sides. These are a little more traditional, kind of like Trassman's, just one hole and no cutout for holding for the lock ring, a traditional impact style lock ring. If we look at the half-inch drive here, it's a little more obvious, the flats. It's really pretty angled, and the socket really wants to kind of bind, or not bind, but it's really the best word I can think of is lumpy, really, because when you're turning it, it kind of wants to, the extension kind of wants to rock suddenly. It's not super duper smooth. And on the 1/2-inch drive, they did the same thing. The old style had the shelf, so you could push the socket on and lock it, where the new style, they got rid of it. I will say that on the new style, they did round it a little, the newer generation where it's stamped. They did round these a little bit more, and you can actually see the machining marks. So I did want to point that out, and that appears to only have occurred on the 1/2-inch. The 1/2-inch appeared to be proportionally not just more expensive or higher quality because they're 1/2-inch, but that they're actually a better made tool, which I also thought was interesting. And I did buy these because I thought these were kind of curious because they're 1/2-inch drive extension reducers. And I like that idea where you needed to use a small socket to get into a tight space, but you're on an extension. So I didn't really buy it so much for these short ones because it doesn't make much sense. I really bought the whole set for this long one where you're putting a lot of torque. You can feel 3/8 extensions twisting some. So I thought this was a great idea because you get a nice heavy-duty extension. You don't have an adapter, which takes up extra space. Admittedly, I have broken one of these, and Harbor Freight replaced it, so you have to be aware of that because it's still a reducer, and it still will shear off at the point where it's weakest. And of course, we'll take a look at the one locking 1/2-inch drive extension. It just is the same as their chrome ones, just in a impact version. One thing I will say about the impact ones, it seems to be made especially nice because you can see they even did a nice job making sure they chamfered the end of the drive square, which I pretty much never see on Harbor Freight. The second thing I was going to mention is this is a proto socket, so it's a nicely sized socket, but the anvil on this is really tight. And so I did want to point that out. As for some reason, this one extension that they sell seems to be really well made, really, or at least careful detail. Maybe it was made on some newer equipment or something at the factory. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention and do a quick review of the various Harbor Freight impact extensions, and to mention that the wobbles are very handy, but they're pretty weak. And you want to be careful with them, but they can be an absolute lifesaver at the same time. Pretty much the best ones I would say absolutely get are the 3/8-inch drive straight ones. Even though they're chrome vanadium, they've held up a lot better. So the chrome vanadium and the heat treatment, as compared to the grade of chrome molybdenum they're using, these may shatter under extreme torque, but under general use they've really held up much better. And I'll have to say the same thing about the locking extension because it also seems to be just a little bit different from what these more bulk items are. Anyway, once again, I really appreciate everybody watching. Please subscribe. Catus Maximus out.